Hi, everyone, and welcome. My name is Modiara Kamps, and today we're diving in one of the most critical yet often underappreciated parts of talent strategy, which is proving the value of employer branding. We'll explore how metrics, mindset, and momentum come together to show real business impact. I'd like to share my insights in why measurement isn't optional anymore, explore KPIs that really matter, talk about building reports that influence decisions, and highlight some of the current trends in EB measurement before closing with a Q&A. Because if you ask me, employer branding must evolve beyond storytelling. Because many still see employer branding as a bit fluffy, and in most cases, it's used as a reactive tool, which makes it even more challenging when it comes to demonstrating ROI. With the changes in TA, from a decline in jobs in 2020 due to COVID and an increase in TA labor demand in 2021 and 2022, we now see another slowdown and decline in TA vacancies in 2023 and 2024. So as labor markets tighten and shift towards skills-based hiring, employer branding has to evolve from a broad talent attraction function to having a more strategic focus. And in order to demonstrate that strategic approach, we need to shift from hard to measure efforts to performance driven predictions. Because without data, we're losing clarity. And without clarity, we're losing credibility. We need to make employer branding as measurable and as business aligned as any other function. Because employer branding is measurable, it's just differently. And measurement builds trust with leadership. It drives better hiring and aligns brand work with core business priorities. When you use data, you earn your seat at the decision-making table. We need to shift our mindset to find that data empowers the professionals to influence strategy. Because as I said, it supports with credibility with leadership. It can also make talent acquisition work more efficient, from speeding up hiring, reducing cost, and that business alignment, linking hiring with company growth is so important. So your seat at the table is earned through metrics. Your employer branding metrics funnel needs to be aligned with your candidate journey to be able to review and influence your employer branding strategy. Brand awareness is the first step in the candidate journey, and it's understanding how you're known by your target talent. The brand perception that then follows answers the question how desirable or how respected you are within that target group that you're after. The interest and engagement phase gives you metrics that explain how you capture and hold the attention of your audience. And the conversion metrics after focus on applications that really turn that interest into getting people to be interested to join. The effectivity of your efforts can be measured by measuring the percentage of applicants that then pass that screening or that assessment phase, more or less. But for me as well, that's kind of where most of employer branding efforts stop in terms of reach or their circle of influence. So it's all about connecting the dots in terms of metrics, your candidate journey, your brand strategy. Which of these 5, 6, 7 pillars can you influence, and do you need to influence to demonstrate that added value? Throughout my career, I've worked with a range of employer branding metrics, and they're far more than what you can see here. But what I wanted to show here is basically a summary of the most impactful and representative KPIs that align with the core purpose of each category on the left, but that are also widely used and easily understood for your stakeholders, and that enable you to offer quick performance insights and to make a data-driven decision for reporting. So when reviewing KPIs, we have to be mindful of metrics that look good and drive results, because not all metrics are created equal. There are vanity metrics like likes and followers that are more service indicators, right? So they're easy to track, but they don't really actually reflect that progress within your candidate journey. And then you have strategic metrics who are tied to that candidate movement and the business outcomes that matter. So, for example, you have the likes on the left, which is super nice to have, and I think we all want them. But it's way more interesting to share with your stakeholders, hmm, how many leads or registrations or applications did I actually generate with this job or recruiting employer branding effort? Then you have your followers on the left on your social media pages. But it's way more interesting to know out of these X amount of followers, this percentage of following is an actual fit for the roles that I have. So what's your audience fit? And then impressions. I mean, as maybe the marketeers know that are in this webinar call, the more budget you have, the more impressions you can generate. But it doesn't say a lot about the engagement and the impact that you're making, right? So the engagement rate and then up to what point people want to engage with the content that you're showing, that is way more interesting, right? So I'd like to focus on metrics that reflect movement in that candidate journey to distinguish the signals from the noise. And I'm not saying that you should not use the metrics on the left, but if you don't have a lot of time to prioritize, I would always go for metrics that reflect that candidate journey progress that you're making. So we now looked at why measurement isn't optional anymore. And we also walked through some KPIs that really matter and how much I'd love to deep dive into the different KPIs that are there and walk through each category and context of recruiting goals to really help you make your metrics more actionable. I had to make a choice in essence of time. So I've chosen to now continue my talk and high level dive into the next steps that you can take once you've captured all the data to truly prove that added value of employer branding. If you want to know more about the different KPI levels or each KPI category, just send me a message on LinkedIn and I'm happy to set up some time with you and talk through. But for now, let's focus on that added value. And showing that added value of employer branding obviously also depends on the resources that you have, the budget that you have available to turn that data into, something that works. So I also understand that we might not all have money for a fancy employer branding dashboard. And as I wasn't sure what type of access you have for those who are listening or how much experience you have, I just wanted to focus on three things in the remaining minutes. So let's dive into how to read and interpret it, some of these key metrics. Then think about how to build and present a basic report and translating some of those insights into stakeholder relevant actions so that after this, you have a little bit more confidence in showing that data and showcasing that added value of employer branding to your internal stakeholder group. So let's start at the beginning. Step one, because every great measurement journey always starts with messy data, unanswered questions, and a small win. And it's very simple because how I look at it is that we want to frame this as a story, right? We have a huge box of data, no structure. We need to identify what's useful. And then there are a few key talking points that you can consider. Those are, what questions are we actually trying to answer with this data set? What data do we have? What are we actually missing? Was it hard or easy to pull? And which small win can help us show the ROI of our employer branding efforts and trust and create and build that trust, right? So once we've answered those questions, we then go into step two, where we focus on who we're actually talking to, because the different stakeholders care about different metrics. So it's important to create some kind of a metric stakeholder map. So you can tailor your reports accordingly, because finance wants to hear about the cost per hire, recruiters want to know more about the conversion ratio, and marketing wants to see the visibility stats. So understanding your stakeholder priorities through metrics is one of the most important things to start, because you need to know who you're talking to. So I decided to sum up some metrics on the left side, just as an example, and it's all fictional data. And then I classified some of my stakeholders group and mapped them out accordingly, just to understand who am I talking to and what are they interested in. Because metrics should tell a story. You should use them to connect the data between employer branding and the outcome. Like, for example, efficiency, candidate experience, brand reach. And this is how you can take the data and make it actionable and compelling. So if we're talking about all these metrics, how can you then classify them into different segments? So I gave it a go and came up with 3 pillars. One, recruiting performance, which is basically showing how effective and efficient your recruiting branding efforts are, which connects to business outcomes, which is interesting for example, TA leadership or finance. Then 2, you have the candidate experience, which basically shows how people interact with your brand, how they interact with your process to make branding more human and actionable. So that's very interesting for the employer branding people on the table, 100%. And then you have the marketing and visibility and engagement part. So that's the top of the funnel campaign level impact. How many people that I connect with, which is very interesting for marketing, but also for leadership, also for employer branding specialists. So it's not that is segmented bit by bit, and there's always a little bit of overlap in interest, but this is how you could take your metrics and segment them. To make it more complete, I decided to also put some metrics under the different pillars that I just came up with. So recruiting performance could cover cost per hire, time to fill, source of hire, quality of hire. Candidate experience focuses on those applicants, right? So it's the volume, the quality of your applications. Are people actually happy when they're talking to us? Like what's their satisfaction? And within marketing visibility, it's all about your go-to marketing metric, click-through rate, engagement rate, cost per click, follower growth, everything. So that's how you can take the data and think through who you're talking to and what you would then need to represent to whom. And since we're not starting with that fancy dashboard, we can bring all of this together and build a lightweight strategic performance report, or almost like a snapshot. And the goal here is not to be complex, it is to bring clarity. So I would start with, what do my stakeholders care about? What progress did I make? And then use that to build credibility. So it's basically a one-pager that we're thinking about that can help you organize your thinking, communicate your progress, and really, really gain and build that trust with your stakeholders. So we're now going to practice creating a report, and it's going to be a bit of an exercise, but I'm going to do my best to talk you through. I brought some sample data, and I want to dive into this to really understand what's the story here. So it's a small case study, which is about job content distribution, which receives a lot of clicks, but very little applicants. So we see in terms of metrics, 120,000 impressions with a click-through rate of 0.9%. We see career page visitors, 1,080, and there's a conversion ratio to apply of 1.8%. So there are only 19 applications. Following, we find 3 sources of hire or of application, I could maybe say. And then in terms of working through this case study, I came up with some discussion prompts. So what does this actually tell us? Where's the drop off? What could be the cause of this funnel? Like what is influencing what? And what employer branding action could you take? But also, how can you explain this to a CMO or to a hiring manager, which are 2 complete different profiles to talk to? I'm going to give this a little bit of a go. So how I would analyze this is that I would start with that funnel overview. So I would look at, the click-through rate is 0.9%, and the applicants are 19, so it's not too much. And how I would look at it is that we're getting a good visibility at the top of the funnel, but there's a drop between the career page visited and that application. So that low application conversion for me would suggest, for example, issues with the candidate experience, which is possibly due to an unclear value proposition on the career page, or maybe poor user experience, or too many steps to apply. Besides that, if I look at the sources per hire, I see an over-reliance on job boards because there's 85% of the applications or hires are coming in through job boards. So there is an opportunity to build a stronger organic audience, but also referral pipelines that we could potentially tune into to basically diversify, I should say. So as a next step to my hiring manager, I would recommend, maybe we can review the career page to clarify our EVP, to make clear why somebody should apply. Like, are you that person? Is this a good fit for you? Then apply now. Simplify that application process once they get there to reduce that friction, and invest a little bit in branding content. So do we have some employee stories out there? Play our culture well, that organic interest, trust from my visitors or my target talent. And then I would also retarget those site visitors with employer branding ads to re-engage their interest, right? Like, oh, they've seen us once. Well, let's see if they then actually also want to apply. So once we have done all of that, and that's basically our, how to say, analysis, now we have to turn those insights into an overview. And if we're going to go build a report that influences, I'd like to set some parameters on how to build actionable reporting that business leaders can understand and value. So once you formatted that funnel overview, you have those insights and next steps. These are some tricks that can help you communicate that value of employer branding more effectively. I would say one, start with business goals. Start with connecting your results and outcomes with business goals. So are you contributing to growth? Are you contributing to your D&I aspirations, cost control? I would also align employer branding goals to this. In that report, I would always try to show a before and after in terms of storytelling with metrics. I would try to visualize the conversion funnel somehow, even if it's just a funnel that you draw or something, just to kind of understand or create an understanding of that candidates actually go through a process before they apply. And if possible, I would use a dashboard, which you can do in Power BI or Tableau, Google Data Studios. There's so many options, but I would just try to find something to grab all this data and to clarify that. So what it would look like without the dashboard would be a report, the following segments. One, business alignment. So the goal that I have with distributing this job content in my case study is to do or support the scalable hiring for growth, contribute to D&I, and also contribute to a lower cost per hire. The challenge that we have is that we have high visibility, but there's poor application conversion. So people are not applying once they've landed on our page. And this is something I would directly explain like that to the hiring manager. Then I would show some kind of a funnel snapshot that takes in all these metrics as in a before scenario, and then also highlight that there's a major drop off from visit to application, which is only 1.8%, which is not a lot, because if you have 10 visitors, it would basically mean that 1 or 2 people only apply, which is very little. I would share some key insights saying, well, I think that our EVP is unclear. Maybe we need to review our application process with recruitment. Maybe our referral programs are a bit underdeveloped. Can we invest in that? And as next steps, I would just make some recommendations to also say, let's invest in employer branding a little bit. Like, let's get some stories out there, or let's try to boost our social media channels organically. And definitely request some budget to retarget those high intent visitors. So I think this is an example of what you can do to take all these metrics and translate them into something actionable that is clearly understandable for hiring managers. And as promised, I also like to close my by highlighting some of the current trends in EB measurement. Because in 2025, we see more and more evolution and sophistication in this field, and the innovation in employer branding analytics and tools that drive modern measurement are very interesting. So if you, just to highlight them for you to Google after, I would say if you're not doing this already, dive into the attribution modeling. So the use of UTM, CRM data, tracking pixels to link campaigns to applications. It's been around longer, and especially within the marketing playing field. But I'm now seeing that this is more set as a standard across the board, which is very, very good. And I'm very happy about that. But still, not everybody's doing it. So highlighting it here. I see that there's sentiment analysis and brand health indexing coming up. With that, I mean there's a growth in tools to analyze your EVP language, to analyze candidate reviews, to also get insights in tone of voice, inclusivity, resonance based on the basis of AI. I see more real-time dashboards coming up for brand engagement, where you can get instant feedback on your campaigns. And there's an increase in the use of real-time social insights, which are easy and accessible if you can do it, because what it basically means is that HR teams are working more with marketing. So you, as a recruiter or employer branding specialist, can also work more with HR, use real-time social insights, and adjust your messaging accordingly. So I would like to close with the following. I'd say, let's take action, right? Don't let soft brand work get soft results. Own your metrics. The more we measure, the more influence we gain. Start small, stay consistent, and keep aligning with business outcomes. Thank you so much. Would be great to connect with you on LinkedIn. Yeah, and thanks for having me as well. Have a good one. Bye.